Hey everyone, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market Podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets, how to increase your market business success while providing people with fresh food. Farmers markets are essential. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer or food maker selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast. This week we're chatting with Chef Michael Ceraldi, owner of Ceraldi in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, on Cape Cod, about sourcing locally and supporting farmers and markets. I'm one of your hosts, Bridget Myers. I'm a longtime farmers market manager and education coordinator at Farmers Market Pros.
And I'm Kat Fields-White, Director of San Diego Markets, still an active Farmers Market Manager and consultant, founder of Farmers Market Pros, and host of the Farmers Market Pros community.
And I'm Justine Marzoni-Mead, Tent Talk producer and marketing director for Farmers Market Pros.
Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market Podcast, is supported by the Food Corridor, streamlining rental kitchen operations to make things easier for kitchen managers and food entrepreneurs throughout the U.S. Their online platform makes equipment scheduling, storage space assignment, and billing seamless and provides alerts to be sure each vendor's permits and insurance are current. If adding an incubator kitchen is part of your market strategic plan, they can help. Find out more by clicking the Food Corridor logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Well, welcome back to Tent Talk, everybody. Today, our guest is Chef Michael Ceraldi, owner of Ceraldi on Cape Cod. Chef Michael opened his namesake restaurant in 2014 and has become well known for his rotating 7-course menu of upscale fare with an Italian accent, focusing on hyper-local ingredients sourced from Cape Cod purveyors. Welcome to Tent Talk, Michael.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys having me on.
I was privileged to enjoy the tasting menu at Ceraldi earlier this year, right before they closed, or I guess it was late last year, right before you closed down for the season out there. And I have been around the food world because I'm old and I've been doing this in one form or another for a while. And truly, it was one of the more memorable meals of my life. Enjoyed every minute of both the food and the presentation. It was incredible.
Yeah,
Oh,
Kat
wow.
came
Thanks
back
so
and she was like, we got to get this guy.
Yeah.
We got to get him.
She was talking about it for a very long time.
That's right.
Oh, that's great. I'm happy. I'm happy that you had a good experience and got to taste a piece of Cape Cod, a piece of time and place on the Cape.
Not only tasted it, but was introduced to each ingredient.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's really quite the experience.
That is so awesome. Yeah, we love that. And Kat's always like on the hunt for all the local ingredients, and she's very much will call you out if you're faking it. So she came back and she's like, he's really sourcing locally.
I really am.
Yeah. Well, Michael, we're really excited to chat with you today. If you just want to give our listeners like a little kind of background, you have quite a long and decorated career as a chef. Like, did you always want to work with food? Maybe tell us about some of your experiences that got you started in this field.
So I guess I was always interested in cooking in terms of I always liked eating. So I was always a big fan of eating. And, my earliest cooking memories are my family's Italian. My mom cooked from scratch everything growing up. When other kids were going to school with fluffernutters and the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, I was going to school with eggplant parm or like cold meatballs sliced on bread and stuff like that. So some of those early memories of my mom cooking in the kitchen, frying up the eggplant cutlets and taking those from hot off the paper bag that they were draining out on. So, like, those are my early food memories. And a lot of my memories when going back in my own personal history are, what was there to eat at whatever the event was, what was there to eat. So I've always been interested in food for that reason, just because I love to eat. So my first job as a kid, as a teenager, was working, flipping burgers for a couple summers, and then working as a barista at a bakery cafe. So that was sort of the origins in Nyack when I was a kid. Those were my first gainful employment in the food and beverage industry. And then I moved to Syracuse when I was 16. Ended up, my whole family moved up there from Nyack. It's about 4 hours north of New York City. And we my father had gotten me a job bagging groceries, which was like the worst. It was like I totally hated working in a grocery store. I know that like it's, we all need groceries and it's a great job for some people, but for me, I wanted to do something more creative. I wanted to use my hands other than just ringing up groceries. So I was like, you know what, I really want to quit. I told my parents, I was like, thanks for getting me the job, but I really want to quit. And, my dad was of the mind that I had to have some sort of job because I was a teenager and, I had to have something going on. And so they were like, you can quit once you find another job. So I ended up having had, this is a long-winded story about how I got into the restaurant industry, but I had joined, I was always into art. Like that was a big part of when I was in high school. And I got into doing like tech for plays and I made props and things like that. And I remember someone brought nachos, and this was like 1996 or 7. And it wasn't like, at least on the East Coast, it wasn't like there's a Mexican restaurant at every corner back in those days. It just wasn't that way. And I growing up like an Italian household, had never had guacamole. Like I was 16, 17 years old. I had never had guacamole. And I had these nachos and I was like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever eaten in my life. Where did you get these? And so my friend who had gotten them told me about this restaurant that's in the what they call in Syracuse the Westcott Nation. So Westcott Street is kind of like the Haight-Ashbury of Syracuse, if there was such a thing. And so the restaurant was called Alto Cinco, high five. And I went in, cold call. I just walked in. At that point in time, it was takeout only with a couple bench seats. And I walked up to the counter. I said, hey, are you guys looking to hire anybody? And there was this woman behind the counter with her apron, gloves, long black hair. And she said, you know what? We're actually looking for a dishwasher. And I said, I can wash dishes on Friday and Saturday nights and maybe one other day during the week. And she said, you're hired. And I said, awesome. And then I went home and I told my parents, I was like, I got a job. I quit the grocery store. I got a job washing dishes in a restaurant. And my mom was like, your great grandfather came to this country and washed dishes. And, it was like, they were telling me that it was, we had worked our way out of the dish pit and here I was going back to it. But now fast forward 30 years, and I think that my foundation as a dishwasher is the exact appropriate foundation to have gotten to me where I am now as a chef owner, along with my wife, Jessie, who is my partner in life and business. But so I worked at that Mexican restaurant. As it expanded, it became a full dining restaurant. It added a bar and a wine list. I did everything from washing dishes to managing the restaurant to bartending to cooking to being like the chef of another restaurant that woman that hired me. She's the owner to this day. Her name is Joanna York. And she really instilled in me from a young age that how do I put this where you can air it? That certain companies that you can call up and get everything from your your carrots to your dishwashing detergent to, let's say, big food. I don't know how you would call that. Like Cisco,
big truck food producers.
You can change that. I'm saying Cisco and US Foods, but she was basically like blank. She was like this company that used to have bleached blonde hair in the late 90s. Cisco, the artist, musical artist. Anyway, you can edit all this out.
Starts with an S. Yeah, it's okay. They're not our sponsor.
She was like, Cisco
never
is the
will
devil.
Be.
And she told me Cisco was the devil. And I was like, Yeah, I agree with you. I understand why you said that. But she really instilled, Joanna really instilled like a lot of the of how to run a business, both myself and then it is the restaurant where I met my wife, Jessie, and she also ended up working there in college. But Joanna was just very integral in my like learning what it means to be independently run business and how to treat your staff. Like she did everything from, she sent me money when I was broke in Italy. She bailed people out of jail, sent people to rehab, like, went to their graduation. She was that sort of person that it was like working there was kind of like the city of lost boys side kind of vibe. Like it was a bunch of like punk rockers and hardcore kids and hip hop kids and hippies, but it was just like it was a very, as someone that had just moved to a new city in high school, that was like my what do you call it? The place where you go and solace or whatever.
Yeah, a little refuge.
Your sanctuary.
Yeah.
My refuge, yes,
Yeah.
yes, my refuge, my sanctuary was the dish pit of El Cinco. But anyway, so I worked at that restaurant all through college. I went to Syracuse University for art. I have a BFA from the Visual Performing Arts School with a major in video arts, but I also did a lot of ceramics and metalsmithing and painting, all sorts of stuff. I apprenticed did a semester of study in Florence. I fell in love with Italy, and then after school, my godfather wanted to gift me some sort of gift for graduating college, and his mother had a restaurant in Westchester, New York, and he talked to my mom, and my mother was like, "Do you know anyone down in the city? I know Michael wants to move back to Brooklyn and possibly get a job in the restaurant industry in New York. Do you know anyone down there?" And he's like, "Well, my mom's restaurant's long since closed, but I do have one friend to let me reach out." And so he reached out to his friend. He gave me his friend's cell phone number. I called his friend up, and it was Sirio from Le Cirque. And at this point I was like, I had rolled burritos and grilled salmon. Like I wasn't Le Cirque level. I didn't know who Sirio was, rest in peace, but he was kind of like the godfather of fine dining Italian food in New York area. And so I talked to him. I called him up on a cell. I talked to him for a while, and he was like, it sounds like you're passionate, but perhaps in a very thick Italian accent, it sounds like you're passionate, but perhaps you should go and get more experience and then give me a call back. Doesn't your godfather know anyone back home? So my godfather Marco was from Bologna, is from Bologna, and so we ended up talking, and Marco had some family that knew some people with restaurants. And so I ended up traveling back to Italy after graduating school and apprenticing in 2 different restaurants in the Bologna area. And I mean, that was an amazing experience. And what I learned while I was there, more than how to make pasta and peel onions for the chef and stuff like that, is that I learned that farm to table in Italy, and actually most of the world, and here as well, if we go back 150 years, is just what restaurants are. Like farm to table is how it's done. You only cook things from your region. I mean, Italians are fiercely proud of their region, not of Italy, but of their region in Italy. No one in Sicily is importing Taleggio from the north. It's like we have what we have here, and you can go enjoy that Taleggio up there. So that experience kind of was very impactful as a human and as a chef, but more so as a human being, like why it's so bizarre that we're shipping things from here to there and everywhere. Why aren't we just using what grows in that area? So then I ended up coming back from Italy. And then when I got back from Italy, that same woman who gave me that dishwashing job was opening another restaurant that was a more fine dining Mediterranean restaurant, including Morocco. So a lot of people say Mediterranean, and they're only including white Mediterranean. But this was a holistic Mediterranean restaurant. We did everything from tagine and to fellatio. Yeah, there you go. Coming full circle. So we did everything from tagine to like Italian stuff that I had learned, and we brought it all together, paella, all that in this restaurant just outside of Syracuse. So I did that for a year, and then ended up moving to New York City. I worked for I'm going to say I worked for a chef named Mark Ladner at a restaurant owned by the Bastianich Batali Group. And you almost don't want to say it out loud, but yes. So anyway, I
used to be a good thing to talk about.
Yeah.
It used to be
it's like scrubbing that off their resume.
It used to be a good thing to talk about, and I would never scrub it off my resume because Mark Ladner, who's the chef that I worked under, was one of those people in my career that were most influential. Him, Joanna, and then one other person I'll talk about in a second. But I worked at Del Posto when they opened. So 2004, 2005, that winter is when Del Posto opened, and that was quite an experience, having come from upstate New York to like, here's a $12 million kitchen, not restaurant, but just the kitchen. And you had every gadget and gizmo and a cold room for breaking down your fish and all sorts of things going on. And the best chefs, Mario Carbone of Carbone fame was working the grill when we opened. And so I was working with some very high caliber chefs and learning some very amazing technique, and ingredient quality was way up there. So I learned a lot of stuff there. And then it was like I had a little bit of this is too intense. I need to not do this anymore. And I took a hiatus from cooking for 6 months, and that was great. Although I just felt like I was wasting time because I wasn't working with my hands, same as I felt like when I was 16 back in groceries. I was like, this is not creative. I want to do something creative. And so I went back to work. I had originally worked at this little restaurant in Brooklyn before I went and worked at Del Posto. And I went back to that restaurant in Brooklyn. The owner of the restaurant's name is Albano Ballerini. The restaurant has since closed, but he was Marchigiani, which is like Central Adriatic coast. But Albano was really instilled in me, like Albano, Mark, and Joanna, they all really instilled in me different things. But Albano, his passion for the food and his homeland, and like the romance of all of it, the romance of the wine that pairs with this dish, the romance of like the slow cooking and the steps and like taking care of each ingredient. We would go to he's the one that really introduced me to green markets. So we would go to the green market at Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn, which is right in front of the Brooklyn Library, where there's that arch, like in Paris. And we would buy ingredients for specials. Our whole menu wasn't based on the farmer's market there, but all of our specials would be based on whatever we could get at the market. So we got everything from whelk, from the seafood stand, and we would get, like, he got one farmer to grow puntarelle, which is wild to have that at a farmer's market in New York. And we bought a whole pig. I remember there's a video on High 8 of us carrying a pig down the street in Brooklyn on our shoulders to the restaurant. And I started experimenting, making my own prosciutto there and salumi from scratch. And that really introduced me to farmers markets and all that. And then I went from there. once I felt like I'd worked there another year, and I felt like there was a lot for me to learn. I needed more teaching. So I ended up going and working at Felidia's, which was Lydia Bastianich's flagship restaurant. Lydia Bastianich been on PBS forever. So I went and started working at Felidia's, and I learned some great things there as well. And then I got married, my wife got pregnant, and I was like, I can't work in Manhattan 6 days a week. We decided that it was time for us to get out of New York, period, because we didn't want to raise our kid in the city, yada yada. I had a friend that had moved down to Louisville in Kentucky, and she was managing a restaurant called 610 Magnolia. The chef there is Edward Lee. And Edward had come up to New York at that point in time. This is when that was his only restaurant. He came up to New York to do a James Beard dinner. And I was like, hey, yeah, if you guys are up here and you need some extra hands in the kitchen, I've never worked at the Beard House. I'd love to get in there and help you guys out, volunteer. So we hit it off. And he was like, you want to come down to Kentucky for the Derby? I could use an extra set of hands. I'll fly you down. And at that point in my career, I'd never been flown anywhere. So I was like, that sounds great. I would love to, fly me somewhere, fly me to Kentucky. And I was paid with 2 bottles of Willet barrel strength bourbon, and room and board and airfare. And I ended up going down, having a great time. And we hadn't really settled on where we were moving from New York. We just knew we wanted to get out of the city. Originally, we were going to move up to Ithaca just because it's beautiful. It's smart. Like, there's learned people and farms and agricultural school at Cornell. So that was a draw. It's beautiful. But after coming back from Louisville, we were like, I told Jess, I was like, Louisville's great. I mean, there's no one making Italian food from scratch, and there's a lot of people throwing money around, and let's go down there. And I was like, we should move to Kentucky. And she was like, okay, which is crazy. And that says a lot about how much she loves me and trusts me, but
That's true
better
love.
or worse.
Yeah.
And
better or worse.
And a little about how little you'd been in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good point. And even Edward said to me, he's like, you might want to come back when it's not the Derby and check it out. And I was like, no, we need to make moves. Let's do it. So we moved to Kentucky, and I worked for Edward for a year. We did some great stuff. I continued shopping at farmers markets for my family on my own. I did Iron Chef America with Edward. He was the chef. I was one of the sous chefs. Battle tongue in cheek, if you want to check it out. It was pretty awesome. And then we did some cool like whole hog dinners and things like that. And then we had to come back to New York like 2 months in a row for families' funerals. And we're driving back to Kentucky, and I'm like, why are we going to Kentucky? Like, I don't want to be here. It's landlocked. All the ponds have snakes. There's nowhere to swim other than pools. My wife, Jessie, wanted to live by the ocean. I wanted to move back east because my family's was scattered from Vermont to New York. And so Jessie was like, how about the Cape? She had never been to Cape Cod. I had been here twice when I was a kid. My family would go to Vermont in the summers from New York. And so, but my parents had friends out here. So we came out twice when I was like 13 or younger. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And I went on Craigslist. I found someone opening a restaurant in Provincetown looking for, not your average chef, scratch cooking Italian food, like real Italian food. Sent them my resume. And then I worked for this restaurant. It was called Dalla Cucina. I worked there for 3 years. And then going into the 4th year, it had become time for me to do my own thing. And, the reasons why that is, you reach a certain point in your career where you want to work for yourself. And depending on who you are, some people are happy working for others, but I was at the point in my career where I wanted to work for myself. And basically, Jess was like, Well, if you could have your own perfect restaurant, what kind of what would be the situation, the criteria, the breakdown of how it went? And I was like, well, we would own a farm and we would cook whatever we grew on the farm that day. That's what would be on the menu. And she was like, well, we live on Cape Cod and there's not really farmland available that is in our tax bracket because Cape Cod is very limited. It's been farmed since the Pilgrims, but it's very limited in terms of farmland. And so the farms that are here are very small and established. She's like, you're already buying for the previous job from these different farms here and there. Why don't you just go to the farmer's market, buy your ingredients, and cook whatever's there? Let them do the farming. You worry about the cooking. And
go Jessie.
So that's
I like her.
Yeah, Jessie is the reason why our restaurant is the way it is. So it was her idea to have this approach. And we've joked over the years about my inability to plan makes it very very copacetic to this situation where I'm planning the menu daily instead of like next month's menu. So that is kind of funny, but literally at the restaurant, and actually we started in 2013 in Provincetown as a pop-up. So that's what we did that first season, doing 7 courses based off what we could get that day at the farmer's market, or from farms directly, and also foraged things as well. So that's how we started off. It went really well that first season. The online got a lot of buzz and all that. And then it went so well that the season after, the person that let us do the pop-up decided that they wanted to do dinner themselves. So we needed to find a new place to open up, and we ended up, checking around Provincetown. And the Cape is this is Cape Cod, basically. That's how we tell people where we live. So Provincetown is here, and then the next town is Truro, which is here, and then there's Wellfleet, which is here, and then I'm in Brewster right now, which is where I live, which is over here.
So we've just traveled from Michael's fingertips down to somewhere between his elbow and his armpit.
Sorry.
For you listeners.
Any video. So we started looking in Provincetown, couldn't find a spot that fit. Then looked in Truro, and there was a spot in Truro that was great, and we were in negotiations, and they kind of fell through. And this was in April, and the season on Cape is May through October, essentially. So it was down to the wire. We had all this buzz. It felt like a lot of energy behind us, but nowhere to do it. And I drove to Wellfleet to check out this other restaurant that was changing hands, and then ended up talking to the owner of that building, and they were like, oh no, someone already signed the lease. And I literally drove down to the waterfront because I knew there were some benches, and I was going to sit there and contemplate, what the hell was I going to do? I've got 2 kids, no restaurant, season's upon us. And I drove down to the parking lot, and at the building right on the water, there was a sign in the window that said restaurant for lease, and we're going into year 11.
That is amazing.
And you don't have many more seats at Ceraldi, right? Than what you were talking about.
We have 35 currently. We used to have 45, but we took out one big table to convert it into a basically like a morning coffee shop. So going back to the roots there as well. So in the mornings at the restaurant now, we have what we call our cafe, and you can get we do sheet style pizza. You want to call it Roman style or Sicilian, a little thicker. But that style pizza. We have cinnamon rolls, baked goods, chia pudding, stuff like that. And then all the coffee we serve is also roasted right on the Cape, Snowy Owl coffee. So we do that in the mornings, and then at night we do what we've always done, and that's 7 courses based on time and place. So whatever we can get that day on the Cape.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And you're getting from farmers and farmers markets, right?
I literally go to every farmer's market. I go to 3 farmers markets a week.
And which ones?
And I go to Wellfleet, I go to Orleans, and I go to either Truro or sometimes Provincetown. But basically, from Orleans to Provincetown, I hit all the farmers markets. And then after a decade of doing this, I've developed enough relationships that farmers actually come to me with stuff, which is amazing. But I still do go to all the farmers markets, though.
That's great.
That's what we're like really curious about. This is something that we're like always trying to, foster with our farmers that are at our markets, of like building those relationships with chefs. And then, then you can cut out the middleman and you don't have to necessarily be at the market. You can just build those one-on-ones. One of the reasons why we hear that like more chefs don't source from farmers markets or local producers has to do with like cost and convenience. So like, how do you manage those challenges and, while also getting those high quality products that you want?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. So basically, first of all, convenience. Yes, it is not convenient to source from farmers directly. It is much more convenient to call a 1-800 number and have everything delivered from the same truck, pre-washed, no dirt, no bugs. People don't like bugs in their food, turns out.
I like a little bug in my food, then I know they haven't been sprayed with a bunch of pesticides.
You don't want snails in your lettuce. People don't want snails in their lettuce.
That's protein.
Yeah, bonus.
Yeah, unless you dump them in a bunch of garlic.
I've said that before to people. Yeah. And it's hit or miss when you start to talk about free protein. People are like, yeah, no. But anyway, so yes, it's inconvenient to do that. And it is, it's inconvenient to go to the farmer's market versus having someone deliver it to you. But I think what you gain from that lack of convenience is a sense of community, because what our restaurant relies on is the community of farmers. There's no way that it could exist without that. How we do it and our ethos and what we believe in is really, what the farmers have is what's on the menu. End of story. Like, it's not like I go out and I'm like, oh, no one's got tomatoes today. I need tomatoes for my menu because I'm making the menu that day. So I don't need tomatoes. I need whatever they have is what I need. And physically going to the farmers markets, I have a collapsible wagon that I bring with me, and that thing is overflowing by the time I leave the farmers market. And it's, a great photo op. People think I'm hilarious and they're taking pictures all the time. And so as far as our publicity for the restaurant, actually being that guy at the farmers market that no one wants to be online behind because I buy everything is a good thing. And I mean, side note, I've got to the point when I'm at the farmer's market online and I see that, sweet potatoes are in. They're never here. They're finally here. I'm still open. I can use the sweet potatoes. I need to check behind me because I piss people off sometimes because I'll buy all the sweet potatoes. So I'm always like, does anyone need any sweet potatoes? Because I'm going to buy the rest. And they usually want like 2 and I want 30. So it works out.
That's considerate of you.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a whole controversy in Santa Monica at one point where the customers asked the market to not let chefs in until later. And in fact, what they were doing was letting chefs in earlier. And the normal shoppers were frustrated.
Yeah. It's a balance we have to strike. Yeah.
It is a balance, and you need to be a human about it and talk to people. And it also, it's an opportunity for conversation and to learn about somebody. So it's always a good thing, unless you're in a hurry, which happens too. But,
once in a while,
you just put on the sunglasses and get it done. But as far as your original question, which was about cost, the way that our restaurant works is by reservation. So every day I know how many diners are coming to the restaurant. I know what their dietary preferences and allergies are. So, for example, when we take a reservation, they're asked by our reservationist if they have any dietary preferences or allergies. And preference would be I'm a vegetarian. Allergy would be I'm celiac. So they will let us know what that is. And then when I create the menu, I will make adjustments and substitutions for whatever that happens to be. And I am the sort of chef that will, I'm never going to say no substitutions. That doesn't make sense to me as someone that is a provider. Like you get what you get and you don't get upset is not how it works. So when you're going out and spending money at a restaurant, that's inappropriate in my opinion. And I also understand that when someone comes to us, I don't know their history. I don't know their background. We've had people come that are, cancer survivors that have a very, very strict diet. We've had people come that, are celiac for real. Like, and if they have cross-contamination, they will have some serious health problems. So we take it very seriously. And if you're able to give that person that always goes out to eat and can't eat, or feels like they can't go out to eat because they have those restrictions, if you give them a great experience, yes, the person that can eat everything and had all 7 courses the way you planned them is happy when they leave. But the person that has those restrictions and leaves after being catered to and taken care of, because that's what it's about, hospitality. You want to make people feel taken care of, not even feel taken care of. You want to take care of people. That's the job when it comes down to it. So I'm able to do that for people. That all being said, I know how many are coming. I know what's going to be on the menu, and I buy for that many people. So when a restaurant chef might say, "Oh, it's too expensive," and I've worked for those chefs that have that, why don't we shop at the farmers market? Oh, it's too expensive for, getting shell peas from the farmers market when you can just buy them in bulk. The way that I do it, I'm able to actually just buy what I need for that day because I know how many people are coming. So and also with a 7-course menu, you don't need to give someone, a 16-ounce porterhouse at the end because you've had 7 courses. So it also, you can balance cost that way. But as far as our food cost, it's a lot better than what people would think of the way that we do it, because we're buying from people that are local. And what's important to us, Jesse and I as well, is that we see ourselves in the restaurant as part of a symbiotic network of humans and what they're doing and what they're passionate about. So the money that comes into the restaurant is just a representation of energy, right? Money, we can boil money down to a representation of energy. Some people get other people to do the work for them, so they get the money. You can say that, but money is value based on energy expended. And so we see all these other farmers that are just doing that same thing. So that the money that comes into the restaurant from selling dinner goes back out to this network of farmers and makers and even foragers that then are able to follow their passions and what they like to do and what they're drawn to, why someone would have 100 chickens and want to collect eggs from that 100 chickens. That ain't me, but I know someone that who does that and who is passionate about that. And so to be able to just be the conduit that kind of spreads out the energy, and to be able to take it back in egg form. Like this is kind of getting out there and going beyond finances, but the vegetable scraps from our kitchen, save potatoes and onions, all go to feed the chickens that we get our eggs from the farmer. So it's like a very, very symbiotic NCMA sort of thing that we do.
Wow.
Cool.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And in your restaurant,
what we do.
Yeah, I love it. In your restaurant, as you present each course, we're introduced to the type of squash and who grew it and exactly where it came from. Why do you find that important to talk about sourcing? And presumably you talk about the chef who made the plates, but for the food in particular, why do you find it important to give credit to who grew it?
Isn't that important?
I think so.
I think so. Yeah. Not everyone does, it turns out.
That's true.
Yeah, because I had someone comment once on a review or something. It was like, why do I care that your friend that raised the chickens also made the hot sauce? And I was like, I don't know why you care. I care.
I cared
So I told you about
passionately.
it.
I care about that kind of
Um,
stuff.
Yeah.
yeah. So, like I said about that network of people that all make this community what it is, because those people in that network are not only are they what makes the restaurant run, but they're the people that you'll see at the farmers market. They're the people that are actually like invested passionately in this place and in this time, and what they're doing is a reflection of nature. You know, when it all boils down to it, like we have our restaurant, the whole Cape Cod life is very tidal. It's like the ebb and flow of the season. So like high tide, high season, July and August. For example, the population of Provincetown goes from 3,000 in the winter to 30,000 in the summer.
Wow.
And then with 100,000 visitors daily to P Town. So, and then it goes back to 3,000 in the winter. Everything shuts down. Our restaurant is seasonal, so we're open May through October. I don't know what are we talking about?
Yeah, I mean it is amazing how you just kind of go with nature. I have a feeling that we could do maybe like a 3-part podcast on this,
Yeah,
but
there's a whole
but to round out this
volumes
episode,
here.
because I know the clock is waving at me.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Am I talking too much?
No,
it's so interesting.
very
Yeah.
enjoyable, and I think we really are going to have to do a second episode. But to finish out this episode, is there something you can tell our listeners who are all involved with farmers markets about what they could do to help cultivate relationships between local chefs and local farmers and farmers markets?
Yeah, I think as far as chefs cultivating relationships with farmers, it's not, how do I put this? It is something that needs cultivation. It's not like farmers are, not to make blanket statements, but there are people that I feel like they're somewhat skeptical. I feel that at least at first, when I would go to the farmers markets, and I would be like, um, I'd be like, "Do you have any cucumbers?" And he shows me a cucumber, and then I'm like, "No, I'll take them all." And this one farmer in particular, he's always astonished by the fact that I want all his cucumbers. And but then like really the only way to make the relationships really stick, I feel like, is to be unwavering and keep going back. You can't just come one day and then that farmer harvests extra because you were there last week and they think that you're going to want to buy more, but then you don't show up that day. You need to be consistent. And so that's something that's very important. But at the same time as being consistent in terms of you going to the farmer's market and wanting to purchase a lot of produce or protein or whatever, what have you, you need to be flexible as well. You need to be understanding, because farmers work with nature. They don't work with the demand of restaurants. They don't work with the demand of the customers. And so you need to be flexible in that way. And that's why for us it works, because our menu happens daily. So it's not, we're at the whim of whatever those farmers picked. That's what's on the menu. And so it's the farmers that choose what's on the menu. It's myself that chooses how to prepare it with Jessie. Jessie gives a lot of input, more than she gets credit for, into what is on the menu. She also does all the wine pairing with me, because we do a pairing of wine and soft beverages to go with the meal. But it's the farmers that dictate what's on the menu when it comes down to it. And if you're, as a chef, able to let go of all your chefy chefdom, like, the menu, even that the guy from Shameless Show, like all that stuff. If you can just let all that go and let the farmers tell you what you're cooking, then you're able to really work with the nature of the community. So like there's nature, like did it rain or was it sunny? But then there's the nature of the community, meaning this is what they're bringing to the table. So we have someone that produces great cheese on Martha's Vineyard. That's the cheese I'm going to highlight on the menu. We have someone that produces pasture raised chickens. My guy Drew Locke, I've been buying chickens from him since before we opened Ceraldi when I first moved to Provincetown. He does pasture raised chickens, he does pasture raised beef, and he just got some sheep. I was talking to him before this podcast. And I have chickens when his birds are ready. I have chicken liver when his processing happens, and he does that all on farm. What I don't have ever is foie gras. And it's not because I'm against foie gras. And I know you guys live in California and you have your own laws on that. But is that still a thing? Is foie gras still illegal?
It comes and
in
it goes.
It's ridiculous.
It's all very sad.
There's an underground foie gras.
Anyway, I don't have foie gras on the menu because I don't know anyone that raises foie gras around here. End of story. So it's not my need to showcase foie gras and how I can chefily put it with some brioche and fig compote. It's more like, what can I get from here? All of the olive oil we use at the restaurant is sourced from a farm in Greece. The only reason why I buy olive oil sourced from a farm in Greece, it's called Monopati Farm, is because the couple that are members of the family that own that farm live on the Cape half the year and are at every farmer's market selling olive oil from their ancestral farm in Greece. So, of course, I'm going to buy all of Maria's olive oil because she's bringing it from her family's farm. She picked the olives, literally. And so that's the olive oil we use at the restaurant for that reason only, because I know her. And so the foie gras is not on the menu because I don't know anyone that raises it, but I do know fishermen that get monkfish liver, and monkfish liver is like the foie gras of the sea. So I'll use that on the menu instead.
Yeah, it's just about making adjustments. I feel like that's the whole farmers market point and how we talk to our shoppers too. It's like, hey, we know we all have these favorites like ingrained in our brain from just our lives, but it's what is in your neighborhood, like what's being grown in your community, what's in season, and we all just need to retrain ourselves to eat like that. And it just is really important that restaurants exist that do that as well, because we can all shop for those things, but it's having a chef say, hey, this is what's available, this is what I'm going to cook with. The farmers are telling me what's going to be on your plate. We all need to just retrain the way that we think about food and eat in that way. And I think that's just the whole point. Yep.
So farmers and farmers markets, find yourself a chef and a customer that looks at you like Michael Ceraldi looks at farmers markets.
Yeah. The best compliment one of the best compliments that I've received is my favorite, let's just put it this way. My favorite compliments are when farmers thank me for sending them customers. That perfect. Makes me feel great. And I remember the first time it happened, it was Andy from Silverbrook Farm in Dartmouth. And he was like, oh, thank you. Like a bunch of people came and said they had gotten mushrooms from me or eaten mushrooms from me at the restaurant. And that happens to this day. People, I send them exactly to whom they can get those ingredients. I'm also not the sort of chef that is going to keep secrets. Like you want to know how to make something, here's the recipe. Go nuts.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
We'll try it and then come back to your restaurant.
It has been such a pleasure. I'm not kidding when I say I think we might want to do a follow-up episode, so we'll be back to you. Thank you so much.
I definitely was rambling there.
That's all right. You just had such an interesting story.
Really, really great story and like really inspiring and just makes me want to fly out to Cape Cod and have some dinner.
Well, that's the thing is that the restaurant has been successful. We're very blessed to live in this community that is doing all this awesome farming, and it's really tiny farms, as I mentioned earlier. But a lot of the times, this is a vacation destination, so we have people come from DC or New York or Philly and Boston. And they're always like, oh, this restaurant is, we love it. It's fantastic. When are you going to open one in? And then they say, DC. And I'm like, well, to quote another customer that came to the restaurant, what we do is not franchisable. There's unless I was to clone myself and move someplace else, I couldn't open this restaurant somewhere else because I need to put in the time. And this goes back to your question about how can you cultivate relationships between farmers and chefs, is that you need to put in the time to cultivate those relationships. They're not guaranteed. Farmers can be kind of ornery. We all know that.
And so can chefs.
True.
Yeah, so can chefs.
Very true.
We can all be pretty cranky. We can all be cranky. But when it comes down to it, to open a restaurant like this, anyone can do it. But you need to be able to go to your local farmers market and foster those relationships. And it's about community more than anything. But there's no way that I could open this restaurant in multiple locations, because what we do is based on the people that are part of it. And that's our whole community. It's not just us by any means. So we are part of that wheel. But we are not, we're just part of it. We're part of the community that uses what all this community does. And so in order to do that somewhere else, invest in your community. That's what it is. It's not an abstract concept. It's not some new farm to table, which is such a ridiculous thing to say, so anyway. I'm getting off.
If we let you go, you'll go all day. But thank you so much for taking. I know we're tell us more, but this podcast can only be so long.
Yeah. You're a perfect farmers market aficionado and
Yeah.
chef, and
Great
I will
partner.
be making my way back to Cape Cod at some point.
We'll talk to you soon. All right.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye.
Thanks for listening today, and big thanks to the Food Corridor for making things smooth and easy for rental kitchen managers and food entrepreneurs working at farmers markets throughout the U.S., and for supporting Tent Talk, the farmers market podcast. Find more information by clicking the Food Corridor logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Farmers markets are all about connection, and all of us, operators, farmers, and vendors, keep learning. Connect with people just like you from various parts of the country and share what's happening in your area in the terrific conversations over in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community. If you're actively involved in a farmers market, please find us there, answer the 3 qualifying questions, and join the group. You can also message us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros or email us at connect@farmersmarketpros.com. If you're looking for further education, check out our online course offerings at farmersmarketpros.com. Thanks for listening to Tent Talk. Please leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you access your podcasts, and tell us and others how you're enjoying Tent Talk. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss the next episode. Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is proudly produced by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Justine Marzoni-Mead. Original music by David Mead. Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll have another great episode next week, so tune in.